you'll know this. I mean, for those fathers who are involved in their children's lives, you know, it's an honor to look after your children. So really, I mean, the very fact that he doesn't have any babysitters is a good thing. You know, then he gets to spend the time with his children, right?
Yeah. I mean, just to throw it way ahead there. You know, I'm a father of 2 adult children. You know, older than yourself, Casper and Tosin, and the fact they just spend time with me. If they didn't want to spend time with me at my age now, that would be the thing which would actually probably undermine my mental health more than anything else. That's the fact that they didn't want to spend time with me. So, you know, for all those dads out there, you know, it's the best thing. I can't think of anything better.
No, it definitely is the best thing. I mean, I'm slightly younger than Don.
You can't see that though.
You know what I'm saying? I was telling these young brothers who are here with us today that me and Don, I mean, Don is the handsome one. I'm the cooler one. Know what I'm saying? And also the weird thing, I've known Don probably more than 20 years. And we have spoken more with each other probably in the last 3 months, you know, which actually somehow makes up for all these other years when everything was silent, you know what I'm saying? So, and it's with that in mind that for me it's a pleasure, you know, to actually have 2 young brothers in the studio with us today, just to talk about life, to reflect on the last couple of weeks. I mean, for those who've been watching the news or listening, you will know that these here United Kingdoms, they had their own version of the insurrection. People took to the street. You know, I've said that, you know, there is a lot of us who are heavily melanated in this part of the world, you know what I'm saying, which is nothing new. We have always known that, you know, many of us, we are not really welcome. As much as we love this country and we have contributed to this country, and some of us contributed forcibly. Actually, the way we came to this part of the world, we were invited. For those who came in 48, you know, during the Windrush, and then later they will be deported, you know, secretly until, you know, the news broke about these mass deportations back to the West Indies. You'll suddenly find that really our place here in the West is we have to walk on eggshells most of the time, you know, because we don't really know the very people either that we have, as much as we have allies and we have colleagues and stuff. You never really know what your standing is in this part of the world. So as these young gentlemen, we have a student, then we have a teacher on that side, and then we have a retired educator over the other end, and then an all-round awesome guy over this side. So the conversation is just around, you know, like what your reflections have been like for the past couple of weeks. I mean, have you seen anything like this, you know, since you came to this part of the world, though? You were born here, Tosin.
Yeah, I was born.
You're born here.
I think last I saw was 2011 riots. 2011, right? Yeah, and that was more from a killing of a black man. And that was sort of like around my home, where in London, I think my town Woolwich actually there was actually riots at one point. And so like people were a bit worried, people were a bit concerned. I remember my grandma calling in my mum just to check in, like, oh, is everything fine? Are the kids fine? But generally, I think I sort of came out of it like not too affected, I think. Maybe it was because I was a kid and I wasn't really like paying attention to like what was really going on around me and like the effects, but I think it was sort of like a storm that passed, I guess, at that time. At least that's how I sort of saw it.
Yeah.
And I think my time in the UK, coming here when I was 8 years old, we moved to basically an entirely white town in the south of England, and there was no one else around that looked like us. And we had a lot of trouble. We had a lot of violence thrown our way. We had... People will know of the National Front existing in the UK, and people believing that they've completely disappeared and they've gone underground. But they were very much where we were. They very much existed. And they were very much still a threat. And we had issues with them where we used to get bricks through the window. We had times where they'd march down the street with weaponry, and we'd try and call the police, and nothing would happen. There was an incident where the same thing kind of happened. They came at us with weapons, and my dad going out to try and defend us. The police came, and they ended up arresting him and my mother, and I was only 8 years old, and we were left alone. They were all left outside. Our parents were taken away, and it was me and my 18-year-old sister at the time, and we were the only ones left. Fortunately, we had a family friend who was also contacted, and he was able to come and protect us, because we were on our own against God knows what would have happened. So it's very much something that has been part of my lived experience in the UK, the violence, the threat, the underlying tensions. So it's never a surprise when things like this happen. When the recent, they keep calling them race riots. They weren't race riots. They were...
They were just riots.
They were just riots, yeah. So it's never surprising. I'm never surprised when white people come out in force with their excuses and try and hide their prejudices, but it's just, like I say, I'm never shocked by it. And it's always when I talk to people and they, I can't believe this happened, I can't believe this happened. Like, well, it depends on your lived experience. A lot of black people in the UK, we know this is normal. This is a normal experience. So yes, it's not a shock. It's not a surprise.
What about you, Don? I mean, considering, you were born here, but you being slightly elevated in age.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting listening to both Tosin and Casper there, and I'm hearing two very different types of lived experience. Tosin's lived experience is very much, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Tosin, about growing up in London. London, this an incredible city there, a city which for many, sort of like those people who are rioting, those white people rioting, they often disparage London because they see it no longer as a white city, no longer an English city there, because it's, got so many people from all around the world, which for me is what makes it so exciting. And then Casper's experiences, which are much further away from mine in terms of, where he grew up in the south of England in an all-white area. And yet, ironically, he's describing the sort of life which I remember back in the 60s and 70s. When, you had people coming down the street. It was casual racism all the time. It was just what white people did then. They called you names at school, and you had to have a fight and all that sort of business there. We had a brick thrown through our window when we went to move to a new house, which was an all-white street at the time there. And I think it's ironic that actually, Casper, you're only 32.
Yep.
So you're talking about 20 odd years ago. Yep. And your point there, which is that sense of people thinking that it had all gone away. Well, maybe it had just retreated into other places. And you see that a lot with that notion of white flight. So that cities have become very different. And that's my experience. And I've seen, cities go from what Casper's described to what Tosin's described, and I'm more familiar with the Tosin world now. And but I have to say, I'm not surprised at all by what's happened. How does it make me feel? It makes me feel unsettled. I mean, we were talking about it the other week, and it's probably made me use a phrase which I've sort of been using with you, Lungani, in conversations, which is, I was born here and I will die here.
Mm-hmm.
And in between that, therefore, I believe that the commitment which I've given to this country and the generations before me and the people here now gives me all the right to have a view and an influence of how this country should go forward. Mm-hmm. So that's how I feel about it. I feel as if this is mine.
No,
and we apologise a lot for that, and I feel as if we should not apologise. And I have to say that for myself, because I know I'm not going anywhere. If I was going somewhere, that might be different.
No, but that's the thing. I think, there's a generation. I remember, actually, I think I've spoken about this, filming a documentary a while back, on the Windrush. Mm. Which we did for I think it was for Sheffield Archives. I mean, Leroy Wenham. I think we worked on this project. I think David Busu actually wrote the beat for that, for the funding to do the filming, and we filmed the older heads in the community about their experience, and there were some everyone came from Jamaica and the idea, from the West Indies, and the idea was they were going to be here 5 years and then go back. And then by then it was like 50 years later, they were still here. But then there were some people who basically said, no, we have never had to deal with racism. You see what I'm saying? But then later in life, suddenly kind of coming to that whole thing, revisiting that conversation and saying, people were afraid to call racism what it is. And there's a lot of us who are still afraid to call racism what it is. So when our Caucasian brothers and sisters, and now I still class them my brothers and sisters, when they take to the street when they're disgruntled about something, which many of us do, because the incident in Southport, isolated as it is, we shouldn't be judged on that very incident as a whole community, because that's where a lot of us basically suddenly feel offense, because we have never broken the law, we follow the rules, we do right. Now to suddenly turn around and be called, all these heavily melanated people need to go back to where they come from. I mean, like you rightly say, Donald, I mean, you were born here. Where are you supposed to go? Tosin, where are you supposed to go? You see what I'm saying? You were born here. Your guys were born here.
Yeah, but you know that thing about, and we haven't introduced Tosin and Casper.
We'll introduce
them. But where you're supposed to go to, I'm not going to frame it like that. I'm going to frame it more like I choose to be here. Mm-hmm. Right, and I'm going to do that because I actually think it's, I want to be more positive, not in a sort of like a for myself.
Yeah.
Because we talk a lot about mental health there, and it's how do you have to be realistic. And when I say positive and I choose to be here, I'm not wanting to be naive at all. Mm-hmm. It is because I don't know anywhere else. I know here. I've got a life here. I've got my children here. A lot of the time,
and grandchildren here.
And grandchildren. I enjoy myself there, but it's framed always by that insecurity you just described there. But I was interested in one of the things you said there about people who, maybe struggle sometimes about seeing things as racist. And I'm not going to tell someone, that's racist. But it might be that some people do that in a form of denial, because that's protection. Because to see it as something as it is, or as I might perceive it, and others might perceive it, or actually would be sort of like really undermining their worldview. It would be undermining their sense of self as well. And that's so difficult to actually handle. If you've ever read Fanon, his books, The Wretched of the Earth, and I can never remember the right title, if it's White Skin, Black Mask, or something, if they were around, Frantz Fanon. And when I read that book, I interpreted what I read as that argument around you have to sort of sometimes you be in a situation to be reborn, you need to deconstruct. But I saw that as well, that in the process of deconstruction, you can nearly annihilate. Like the whole self gets broken up. And for some people, that breakage is so difficult to piece together again. So it's very, very difficult for all of us there. We all have that. The four of us here, different ages, different backgrounds, different aspirations. We've all are contending with that racism, which is so deeply pervasive in the British psyche as a nation. And it's a struggle.
No, it is a struggle. It is a struggle, and I was talking. I was talking to you, Casper, yesterday. Actually, before we even go as far as go to that conversation, I will let these two young gentlemen introduce themselves. Just for context. We have Casper.
So my name is Casper. I am currently working for SACMA, and I'm. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've been a primary educator, so I've been working as a primary school teacher.
I'm Tosin. I'm a medical student at the University of Sheffield.
So we have a medical student and a teacher, a young teacher, a young teacher. But as I was saying, we were speaking about the very fact that our experience here is like, when I came to this, I came here in the 90s. Early 90s, but recently somebody was asking me about my coming here and saying they were talking about access to different places. When I came to this country, I came here as a disruptor, really, in the sense that I had already dealt with the British when they were colonized my part of the world, Zimbabwe at the time. I grew up with us walking on the other side of the road whilst white people walked on the other side of the road, and they owned the country where I was born. You see what I'm saying? So they came, they took whatever they wanted, and they literally put us on the other side of the road, literally. So my coming here was never from a point of I have to apologize for my existence. Same as you, Donald. We came here with an idea. We were here to do a job, make money, go back home. That was the idea. And also we had been given access to this part of the world. You know what I'm saying? We were coming here to work. So as an artist and as a curator of the arts, I came here to teach. So my approach to the British psyche has always been different. It has never really, I have never had any illusions that I will be treated any better than anyone. So when the thing did happen the last couple of weeks, it's not new. It's never new. I've seen it in our own countries.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So when we see it here, we saw it in the States on the 6th of January. The insurrection storming the capital. So for me, that behavior is not new. This is sometimes it's like when we were growing up, my grandparents used to say, these are people, they don't grow, and they were talking about the English, because what they were talking about was the fact that you will see a grown man throwing a tantrum. We don't throw a tantrum. I never threw a tantrum without any repercussions. You know what I mean? So we have seen grown men throw a tantrum or grow. Yeah.
I think the notion of a tantrum, I mean, the riots last week, was it? Last week? It's probably a way of describing it there. People came out on the street. They went to St. Rotherham there. We went to the hotel. It was a mob. They wanted to get inside. Some of the people did get inside, And for me personally, you know, the fact it was so physically close to us was disturbing. The fact that actually on the Wednesday that the city centre was quiet because there were reports that there was going to be a sort of anti-immigration rally there. For me, that it effectively was terrorising people, you know, and, you know, people were scared off the streets. And, you know, it's taken the harsh sentence, well, not harsh, the sentencing, because I think there's a, you know, but, you know, I see myself as a bit of an old liberal really there. I thought the sentencing in 2011 was harsh. I think that actually, you know, part of me wants to say, yeah, we want the same again, but actually, universally, I think it's wrong to do harsh sentencing. And we need to find a way in which we can do justice, which is slightly different to that. Because I think just doing that approach isn't necessarily going to be addressing some of the key issues here.
That's it.
Just, you know, but clearly you have to have a response initially there. But it's the disturbance it does to your psyche. And it's unsettled me. I don't know if that's how you feel, Tosin, and how you feel, Casper. Did it unsettle you?
It was a bit shocking to see, especially because we were driving around, me and you.
Oh,
Donald,
yes, we were, yes.
Then we saw the police just stationed around Wicker, just like creating a protective perimeter, and like we wouldn't see anyone around. When we went to the barbers, everyone was quite worried, quite scared.
They were, yes, they were, yeah. And they were talking about people had been coming in scared as well. And I have to say, I think that's a slight difference to how it might have been. It was like that in, you know, previous riots there, but this was aimed at black people, aimed at people of colour, Asian, Muslims, and I thought that people were more honest. In the sense of people saying they were scared, because at times I remember you saying to some people about growing up, and I remember saying, this is like I said 20 years ago, I was saying to people, when I was growing up I was scared a lot. And they said I was never scared, you know, because I was at this, I was at that, and I said no, I was scared. And that's that business of trying to, maybe they were not scared, but I couldn't do that bit where you could nearly pretend to yourself that you were not scared. And I would be scared and I would self-regulate. I wouldn't go there, I wouldn't go there, I wouldn't go there, I wouldn't go there. And I remember when I was at college in the 80s, it was Polytechnic, it was, 70s, 80s, and after the first year, people were going off on Camp America.
Oh, yes.
And I never even got into the conversation about it, because when they were starting to talk about it, I would just leave the room, because I didn't want to get into the conversation. I didn't want to say to these this white group as such there, I'm not going to go to the States, because I grew up on stories about the States from my dad who went there in the 40s, what I've seen on the TV growing up there. I don't want to go to the States. It was harder for me to go into the countryside of Britain. Never mind going to the deep south or middle America, etc. So you, in a sense, you then become inhibited. You know, you put sort of restrictions on yourself about what you can and cannot do. And I'll stop after this bit. I've got a friend, Maxine. And Maxine Blake. And she, 2 years ago, I went to France for 12 days on my own, to Perpignan. And I was talking to her and I said, I'm really apprehensive about going there on my own, you know, as a black man. And there I'm 62 years old. And she said, Donald, because she's travelled all over the world. And it was that sense of, that's a lifetime of imposition. And when we hear a lot to talk about mental health there. And when you feel like you've had this imposition put on you, it's quite a burden, it's quite a weight. It's quite a sort of mental burden there, which says, I'm not realising my full self here. And I don't mean that in terms of making money and whatever. The many things you can be in your life, the many experiences you'd like to have in your life, which are being restricted because of your colour of your skin. And that can eat away at you. It does. Anger, a bitterness, a frustration, all those sorts of feelings can be there, which, I don't know, maybe, because there's so many things we can be as an individual.
Yeah, and I completely relate to that restriction and the impact that has on your mental well-being. So, I mentioned it before, it might seem like something really small, but I don't walk around the streets with headphones on, ever. Never, ever, ever, because I've lived in an environment where if you hear a loud noise, if you hear something being shouted, if you hear something, you need to be prepared for self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
I do not feel comfortable walking around the streets with a buffer on my ears. I need to be able to hear everything that's happening around me, and that feeling of you're having to monitor everything that you do when you are leaving your home, when you are walking up the street. Every little moment, there's always a little thought in the back of your head that people don't understand is unbelievably draining, because everything is relevant to the visibility of the colour of your skin. Everything is being brought back to that, and it is such a weight that people don't understand. And I think that is something that I try to engage in conversation whenever I'm trying to engage in conversation with right people about politics, about identity, all these different kind of things. That's always a stumbling block, because it is they've never experienced that in their life. They can walk down whatever street they want and feel. There'll be other reasons why they might not feel comfortable, but the colour of their skin is never the reasoning.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, because the first time I went to Jamaica, and all sorts of stuff was going on. I was staying in downtown Kingston, and there's some bad people down there. But I never once thought about race. I thought about being careful, but if they were going to do something to me, because they were just bad men, it wasn't a case of, he's black, I can do that. And I think that psychological wearing, that there's a book out it's actually by an American Jewish writer called Weathering, and she puts this idea out, which is that she went to Harvard or somewhere like that, and within her class of 250 people, there might have been about 30 African Americans. And she said these were guys and women who were going to end up in very good positions, and did end up in really good sort of upper middle class positions, lawyers and doctors and so forth. And yet here she was in her 60s. There was a disproportionate number of those people who had died or had morbidities. And so she really does a lot of work around this idea that is, when you then take socioeconomic out of it, you still see that essentially that the burden of living in as a racialized minority, it has really serious consequences. We saw it in COVID. You're in the medical field there. Doctors, all those medical professionals there was a disproportionate number of black and Asian doctors who died of COVID. And it wasn't just simply because they were frontline staff. Even when they took frontline staff into consideration, it was because of the other things in their lives which had been wired in from early days. Things you can't take out, the experiences which you talk about when you were growing up there, the experiences, if you ever heard David Harewood there, where, as a 5-year-old he's out on the street corner and then people walk by and they spit at him. For me, experiences as a 9-year-old where you're playing and then some people set a dog onto you. Now, these things get wired into you, and they become this sort of like, I don't know, I can't make the right analogy there, but they're things which actually means that actually some of the circuits a little bit frayed.
No, it's definitely it is. I mean, it's like the hypervigilance that you literally have to exist under as a person of color in this particular part of the world. I mean, I recently came back from Zimbabwe, and like your experience going to Jamaica, you don't think that your color factors in. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other things that factor in. Your accent. What is this?
The way you walk.
The kind of trainers you're wearing. Somebody wants them. That's different. It's tough. It is tough. But your race does not factor in, and it's not a big deal. I remember somebody saying to me, because they were talking, because in Zimbabwe there is this thing between the Chonas and the Ndebeles, which is like a tribal thing, really. She said to me, you know, when the electricity cuts, it affects the Ndebele and the Shona. When there is no water, it affects the Ndebeles and the Shona. Now, bring it to this current climate here. When anything affects the country, it affects us all. And to me, it's sort of sometimes it's like it defies logic that you will ascribe your own issue to somebody else's skin color as a reason for why you are in the situation you are in. We saw I'm sure we saw interviews of people saying, well, they're taking our jobs, and some of these guys never even went to school. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? How can a doctor be taking your job when you didn't even finish 9th grade? You see what I'm saying? So for me, it's the delusion and the sense of entitlement that actually makes people go to that length to just because they are having a bad day.
Yeah. I mean, Tosin, I mean, you're the youngest here. You've been back to Nigeria, haven't you?
Only once, and that was back when I was 2.
Oh, so you don't know.
Not the full extent. I mean,
so I'm going to just. So how do you intending? You want to?
Oh, definitely. I'm definitely planning to go back to Nigeria, more so to like just see family and sort of like. Because I think one thing I've noticed as well, like especially now that I've gotten a bit older and like. So like growing up, I was like usually around like quite a lot of black people, a lot of people of my culture. But now that I've grown up, I feel like I've sort of lost that a bit. Actually, not a bit, a lot.
Yeah.
But so I feel like going back to Nigeria might give me like a chance to sort of like reconnect with that, sort of get to see family members and like get their perspectives on that.
It's interesting you say that because I mean, there you are. We talked today about different backgrounds. You know, yours is London.
He's a southerner.
Southern, there are lots of black and Nigerian people where you grew up and how you grew. But as you've gone through that educational ladder there, you're at the top of the tree there at school, you go off to a university like Sheffield University doing medicine. We were talking last week in the car there and I was asking you, well, how many people doing medicine? I think you said, what, 200 odd people?
I think in my year group, there's about 360.
Yeah. But
the amount of actual black people, if I had to guess, probably less than 30 maybe.
Yeah. And how many of those would be sort of like British based, not, you know?
I think majority would be British born or like they've lived in Britain most of their life.
Okay, right, yeah. Because that isn't, you know, again, going back to that book I was talking about, Weathering, you're training to be a doctor, you're going to, you know, will be a doctor there, and you will find yourself, your professional life will be one of a minority. And that's hard work. I mean, I know I experienced it as I ended up as a sort of vice principal of a sixth form. And I would go to events for deputy principals, vice principals and principals. And there might be 200 people in there. And sometimes there'd just be me, one. Sometimes there might be 10 of us, you know, Asian and black, etc. There was never 20, 30 of us, ever. And that's your professional life. And it's hard work. I'm not trying to put you off at all there, because actually doing the job, you know, I loved the job I did. Absolutely loved it. But that was a part of me I had to recognise in my professional self there, which I think people have to do when they go into that world there.
Because I know with you, Casper, you were talking about the fact that in your class for teacher training, you were...
The only one, yeah. I was the only one in a group of There was 400 of us started the teacher training, and I was the only black student.
Wow.
But it's reflective of my experiences anyway. And people are always shocked when I say this, but I have never seen a black teacher. Mm-hmm. In my time from coming over from the Caribbean, ever since I've been in the UK, I have never, for every step of education, I've been in education for 20 years, I have never seen through primary, secondary, college, university, I've never seen a black teacher.
What about you, Tosin?
I saw black teachers pretty early on. I'm pretty sure my primary school, I think reception, I think she was black. Year 1 was black, but predominantly has been like of white origin.
Yeah. Because I mean, the sixth form I was at one point, and I was really pleased about this. There were 90 staff, teaching staff, 70 teaching staff. We had a period where about 15 of us were black or Asian, and the senior management team. There was me. There's 4 of us, me and a black woman, and that was my best working period when there were that team of 4. So it was a white woman, white man, black woman, black man. Now, I don't think it was out of design, but I think it was an influence. I mean, in the sense that actually you create a dynamic which actually begins to be a really good dynamic. You beginning to hear things and be able to talk about things and know that you could raise something and that other person's going to come in and support that perception you've got there, and therefore it has a little bit more leverage there. But I would say that for the majority of black youngsters today in education, they are more likely not to have had a black teacher. They're more likely not to have actually had a black doctor. They're more likely not to find a black lawyer when they need a lawyer. They're more likely not to experience a black police officer when they need a police officer, and so on and so forth there. And that means that actually there's all these ordinary experiences in life where actually, it's not that, the black police officer is still a police officer. The black teacher is still a teacher. The black lawyer is still a lawyer. The black doctor is still a doctor. But actually, there's something where you're saying, well, that's not going to be a part of the agenda in this interaction. Hopefully not. So I think those sorts of things are part of the equation as such there. And, we were talking in the car there about being at university. And I've seen, university is such a pinnacle for so many people. You've worked so hard to get there. You've got expectations from family, the school, yourself. You get there, and we were talking last week, particularly about foreign students, where they're paying £36,000. They cannot afford to fail. Now, you may not, as a home student, have that same cannot afford to fail, but there is a psychological I can't fail, and yet there's a pressure on you. And in this environment where actually you might be cut off from your sort of where I'm there from London, I'm there from Manchester, I'm there from Birmingham, and here I am up there at Ivory Tower, University Bristol, University Sheffield, with 300 students, and there's only a few of us, some of whom I don't even like and don't get on with. I'm on my own trying to navigate this world which isn't necessarily set out for me. And I think that's a lot of pressure for a lot of students. And I think it's no surprise that in some cases, some students, they struggle with it and they have all sorts of mental health issues as a result.
Yeah, definitely. Because when I was at university, I went into it with a naivety. When you're a certain age, when you're 18, I went with a naivety of thinking the things that I'm going to be interested in. That university, you're constantly told that university is designed around you as a student. It's this the moment that you kind of discover who you are, and You're going to have all these different experiences and all these different things. And you think, oh, that's going to be amazing. And I went with the attitude of, I'm going to be able to have because I chose psychology as my degree, and I'm going to be able to kind of cater my experiences to me. I'm going to be able to choose the topics that I want to do. And then once I got to university, you realise that as a person of colour, you are pigeonholed automatically. You're that. What you are being told when you are younger, when you're a teenager, going on to these things and going into the life of an adult, you're told all these things, and then the realisation hits that, oh no, they were talking about the expectation that you will have if you are a white person. You have this. It has such a profound impact on you, because I wanted to go and I wanted to study black mental health. I wanted to study the impacts of racism on education, on all these different kinds of things, these interesting fields that I believe should be a part of the psychology curriculum, but non-existent. It only took until my very last dissertation when I was able to kind of open it up a little bit and start studying and researching the things that I wanted to research, because up until that point I had to be researching things that I was not interested in. And I believe that a lot of young people, especially young people of colour, are kind of, because universities are a business and they're lied to kind of get them in through the door, get them paying and get them in debt, so that they're tied to that university, and you're sold this lie of, yes, it's everything that you're going to want it to be, it's going to be designed for you. But when you have that realisation, it's quite crippling, I found, when I was at university, and it was really isolating because there was no one else to discuss it with. There was no support network there. There was no other students really that I could kind of converse with. So it's a really difficult time of life anyway, but with that added layer, it's even worse.
I mean, is that how did you experience? How do you experience university?
So I think early on, when I was picking universities, one of the major things, or sort of things that were in like the back of my mind, was, are there going to be other black people there, like a decent amount of black people? Because so with medicine, it's sort of like you get in where you can. Like if you get all four, so you apply to 4 unis, if you get all 4 offers, fantastic. In my situation, I only got 1 offer in Sheffield, so I had no choice to come here. So like it was the main uni I wanted to come to. It was my top choice. So thankfully I got here. But it was sort of like I didn't have that sort of option to say, okay, if there isn't enough black people here, I want to go somewhere else. So it was sort of in the back of my mind early on that, are there going to be people similar to me? And I think my brother, he'd already been at uni, he had friends at uni, he told me, yeah, Sheffield is quite decent from the amount of black people. So I was like, okay, cool, nice. And I think first day when I came up with my mum, one of the very first things we did after I'd done like all sorts of admin stuff, we searched, okay, are there any Afro-Caribbean food stores here?
What, in Sheffield?
Yeah.
Are you trying? You're making it sound like you're way out in the wilds here.
That's how it felt, because I think I hadn't left London or like just general London in that time before. So I was like the amount of I already sort of knew that the amount of black people outside of London would be like, I knew it was going to be a difference to what I'm used to. So I was like, okay, am I going to be able to find like the people I need, the food I want? Because honestly, I was really concerned about missing the food back home. And luckily, like I was able, like pretty early on, I was able to like find the foods, the barbers, that sort of support that I would need to like maintain my everyday life. And then finding support as well. I think at the time I was like quite busy with starting uni, because sort of like first day in, like this just already had us doing like lectures, going to introductory stuff and that. So I didn't have a chance to really get into contact with like the ACS and that
and
sort
the
of thing.
ACS is the African Caribbean Student
Afro-Caribbean
Union
Society, yeah. So I didn't get that chance, but I did manage to get down to one of the sports fairs where I joined my team, American football, where even I think the person that approached me was another black guy. So it was like through that team I was able to like make friends that are of my same race, and also like branch beyond my team to make friends of the similar race, similar like that sort of understand what it means to be a black and ethnic minority in the city, and like we sort of like create like a little community from that. It's really nice.
So my question to you, Tosin, is, okay, so how important was it? Is it something that was mention to you that at least if you have people who look similar to you, or is it emblematic of where you are based in London? Why you wanted to make sure that there were people who at least looked similar and had a similar experience?
I would say it was more for comfort, honestly, because I sort of went from, with my life experience, I went from predominantly black primary school, predominantly white secondary school, then a sixth form with like quite a lot, not predominantly black, but like a lot of black people. And it's like comparing that experience, like that secondary school experience, I felt more comfortable in primary school and sixth form. So it's sort of like wanting to make sure that I go back, keep that sort of sense of comfort with people that are similar to me, people that have similar interests, similar culture, similar sort of, just like similar to me, I guess. Just sort of like making sure that I have that same comfort, that I'm not going back to sort of starting from zero.
Because you seem, I mean, sorry to say this, Casper, but you said it yourself there. The way in which he went about it was the university you were going to go to, but you were on the lookout for that. That wasn't something you were doing when you first started then? Or was it just not there in Bristol? At Bristol you went to?
I went to Bristol, yeah, and I think it's really interesting in hearing the different lived experience, because no one's lived experience is exactly the same. So, for example, your primary school, predominantly black, that is something that, like in mine, I was the only one. So it's how it creates a view of the world and your perception of the world. Like, I wasn't looking for black community in Bristol because I've never had it. I never had that community in the first place, and I never knew what it felt like. I never knew what I was missing. All I knew was the racism that I'd experienced, and that was my lived experience. That's what I thought was normal. So I never went looking for anything else, which is, it is really fascinating hearing this kind of how life can be so different based on like you grew up in London. And it's just fascinating to hear how your perception is so changeable and so different based on your upbringing. And it is, like I say, the fact that you had a primary school, there's your college, that was something, now looking back as an adult, it's kind of, I wish I had that. That would have been something that would have completely, I'd be a very different person to the person I am now if I had those opportunities, because it was so different. And it's just interesting how you went straight in, coming to Sheffield, looking for African Caribbean communities and shops and barbers. Whereas when I went to Bristol, I thought, well, that's not going to exist. That's my first thought. That's not going to exist. Why is that going to exist? Yeah. So it's just, it's very interesting showing how different it can be.
Yeah.
I mean, your journey to Sheffield, why Sheffield?
So my parents came over from Windrush and they came to Sheffield. So when I finished university in Bristol, my mum was back in Sheffield, because they didn't have the finances to stay out in the Caribbean, so she had to come back, and she came back to the place that she knew. And I wanted to be closer to family because of the feelings of isolation and all that kind of stuff going down to Bristol. As soon as I finished, I thought, I need to go back. I need to go back to my family, and all my family were up here. So that's why I came back to Sheffield.
So the university, you clearly made these decisions, and were you very conscious of making those sorts of, I'm going to look for? Or was it something which, in conversation with your mum sort of like, it's part of, you've got your duvet cover, you've got this, you've got that, you've got your crockery. Well, I've been there. Now let's go find some food.
It was, I'd say it was the second one, honestly. Yes. Like, we made sure we got all the stuff I needed from Wilco, like, made sure we got the pots, the pans, the plates, the cups, all of that. Then, so we were just like, I think once we bought all of that, we were just sort of like, okay, is there a place where we can get like plantain or anything like that? I was like, okay, let me search up on Google. So I was expecting like, okay, probably going to be like 10-minute, 20-minute drive, probably on public transport. And it just says, boom, I think it was Martin's.
Down on the Wicker.
Yeah, on Wicker, because we were staying at the Premier Inn just off of near the McDonald's.
Yeah.
So we saw that. We're like, oh, 5 minutes walk away. Yeah. Okay, let's go have a look. Let's just go see. And it was like.
So your mum was able to go back to London a bit relieved.
Yeah,
I'm not leaving my boy.
But she'd already left me with some food, but she was making sure that if I needed like a quick top up of anything, something was there. So like, if I needed my plantains, if I needed my gizzard, any of that.
Yeah.
So like we saw that, immediately went there, literally my first day in the city.
Yeah.
Found that, and we see the barbers, we just see like this whole area.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, like I was not expecting this. This is like a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to say that because, you know, doing this project, Lungani and myself, the Black Male Mental Health Project, we've been to lots of barbers, and you go to the barbers there and you're always bumping into some young guy there or young woman there getting their hair trimmed who is from out of town, who happens to be a student at either Sheffield Hallam or the University of Sheffield. And it's, you know, I think for the barbers, they're really pleased about it. Mm-hmm. It's really good that actually people don't just have to go back home. And given how young people now like to get their hair trimmed and whatever every other week, they couldn't afford to keep going back home, etc. there. But, you know, it's clearly a staple part of the culture, you know, in its many different guises as such there. And being a student, I know when I went to Nottingham, Trent Poly at the time then, and for me it was my home city, and I stayed in my home city because basically I think I was a bit afraid, going back to that thing about him, you know, I was scared. That's the feeling I think I had a lot once I'd left my sixth form, because I went to a school which was, you know, at least, this is in the 70s there, a third black. I went to a sixth form where there must have been 50 odd of us who went off to university. And then my brother came up in the summer and we were talking about people. I said, remember Carlton? Yeah, he always wanted to be a lawyer. Well, he did become a lawyer. Do you remember so-and-so? Well, he always wanted to go into business. Yeah, he did. He became a managing director. And all these names were coming back there. And it was a time of optimism. We had, I mean, naively, we had that optimism there. I mean, and thinking actually, I think we bought into that idea our parents gave us, the Windrush generation gave us, which is you have to work twice as hard. Not that I work twice as hard, but I think psychologically work twice as hard. There's no two ways about it. Psychologically, to do any work in this country, you have to work so hard. To do any job where you are very visible, you have to work twice as hard psychologically. So I know that I probably didn't put my hand up to become a head teacher or a principal because I didn't want that amount of visibility. And again, you're denying yourself something. And then one of the things I'd like to say to people out there, you know, whatever it is you're doing, try and do it the best you can. And if actually you're one of those people who could get towards the top of your profession, then put your head above the parapet and actually do that, because that's leadership as well. Someone's got to lead first. I restricted myself a little bit. I did. Whereas we have, I remember Linda, who's the head teacher at King Edward's. You know, and she's at King Edward's, and you know, big shout out to her because she's been the head teacher for a number of years, and she's for me she's an inspiration. And I'll say this because I've said it to her many times. She said my daughter went to a school in Sheffield, did 2 years and wrote a letter and said she wanted to leave that school. And then she moved to Abbeydale School, which is no longer exist. And the first...
They shut it down?
Shut it down. No, they shut it down years later. But my daughter goes to Abbeydale School, and in her English, the English teacher was Linda. And Linda said to my daughter, you know, you're really, really good at English. And she was always been brilliant at writing, in terms of English studies, etc. And my daughter said she was the first teacher at secondary who'd ever said she was good at anything, which is a real surprise to me because, she's your daughter. She was a bright, studious person. When she was at this other school for 2 years, they could find fault. And I'm thinking, you can't find fault with this child. You could find fault maybe with me when I was at school, but not with her. But so the head teacher at King Edward's there, back to that conversation about black teachers, for instance, Linda saw an ability in my daughter and was able to vocalise that ability there. I'm not saying white teachers can't say that or do that, but in this particular case, it was a black teacher who did that. And it was really, my daughter said it was really important to her. It was important to her for her to tell us. So whatever it is you want to do with all of your vigour and your commitment and your energy. And if you're at that position where you want to go to the next step, then you should aim for that next step.
No, that's very true. I mean, I asked yesterday. I asked Casper, when he's running for Prime Minister, when he decides to go back to the Caribbean, because he was adamant that I am going back to the Caribbean. You know what I'm saying? So I'm thinking, he might as well, kind of run for Prime Minister when he gets there. Same time, same way you're writing a book, and then he's
well, you say that. A friend of mine, she's in the Carriacou at the moment, and she was born in North London, sort of Cricklewood way, and her 2 siblings were born there as well, and then her parents went back to Carriacou 30 odd years ago, and the 2 younger siblings went back as well, and her brother, he went back and he became the Minister of Tourism for Grenada, and then out of that position he's now become the something to do with climate change, where he is the sort of like the UN climate change leader. And so he went to Huddersfield Polytechnic, and now he is this person who you will see clips of him talking to Barack Obama, talking to all the big leaders of the world, etc. there. Now, I don't know, but he was able to get opportunities he probably would never have got by going back home to where his parents were living, to what he could get here. I'd like to think that actually there are more opportunities now than there was, but the energy put into it, all those people who are very visible, there's a massive amount of energy which is expended, and you're making yourself open to all sorts of vilification and all sorts of stuff there. But again, I take my hat off for all those people who take those leadership roles.
Oh, that's very true. I mean, I'm sort of, I keep threatening people with I'm going to go back to Zimbabwe and run for president. It may never happen. It's a different kind of way of doing things in my part of the world. We had a common person, a common friend we knew, who went back and kind of sort of vocalized this disgruntlement about the political system back home, and as a result, he was vilified again, because I think there are certain parts of the world. The experience you spoke of your friend who is in Carriacou, that is amazing.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Because usually our people, the moment we leave our countries to go abroad to study or to pursue some semblance of life, when we decide to go back, we are viewed as relatively foreigners in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, is that something which you get, Casper? I mean, you've been back to Dominica, haven't you?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people do, but a lot of people, as soon as you say you're Dominican, and also I think I'm quite fortunate in having a very well-known name in Dominica. So there's a few big families. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a few big families dotted around Dominica.
So you're able to take that privilege.
Yeah, maybe to say the name. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, we know, blah blah blah, and it's kind of like automatically. Oh, right, yeah, you're from this area. Yeah.
And there's a lot of London Nigerians who basically they live both places practically, don't they?
Yeah, quite a bit. I know quite a lot of my relatives. They go back like at least once a year, probably for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I know quite a few people as well, especially in the early 90s. What they had was maybe one parent would be here in the UK working, but they'd come back every now and again with the rest of the family. So like maybe the wife and kids would be in still back home in Nigeria. It was sort of like they developed that sort of pathway for them to eventually come live with them in the UK. But I think at least majority that I know of is more like they visit, just see like family members, their siblings, cousins.
Because it is. I mean, the longer we've had other people who've talked about going not back home, but the longer you are away, the harder it is, isn't it? Because it's imperceptible that actually a place can become where you are with all its imperfections. And then actually, how do you sort of like bridge that gap there? Again, back into that sort of like, you need, in some cases, you might need to have that option, that sense of, I'm going to go back for your mental well-being.
No, but
and can you at some point say, no, I'm not going back? Because then there's big questions being asked, what was this all about?
But that's the thing. I think, like many of us, I remember, another mutual friend of ours, kind of asking me, Clinton McCoy, he asked me, he says, why did you come here? And
how did you feel about that when you were asked that question? How did you feel?
I felt some type of way at first, but then it suddenly dawned on me that as much as I wanted to come and do, because really the idea was to come and study and go back. It was to come and study. I worked in film and theater and stuff, so it was to come study, then go back, probably within the space of a year or two, because I was a big deal back home. You know what I'm saying? I was working in film, and I had done all the stuff in Zimbabwe College of Music, so I was known. Now to suddenly come to a part of the world where I'm relatively an unknown, I can't even get a part in a film. When in fact the first time I came here, I was in a blockbuster, Warner Brothers movie. Suddenly I'm having to go back to being a zero and start from fresh. It was a humbling experience, you know what I'm saying? But I think no one ever talks about the pitfalls that many of us have to deal with, because sometimes when we go back to the very people who say, you go back where you come from. They are expecting you to fall on your knees and beg them to be let to stay here. Some of us were a big deal when we left. When we spoke to Dr. Chooks, spoke to Chooks, he says, I'm a big deal in Nigeria. I'm here just to get this piece of paper and stuff, and I can go back home and I got people who drive for me. You know what I'm saying? So some of us are a big deal where we come from. We are not here begging for anything. Neither are we here so desperate that we don't want to go back home. Some of us can go back home. But unfortunately, I think for me, I tell people I came here, my coming here was just bad luck. No, let me tell you. Yeah, it was bad luck. I say it was bad luck. I had an opportunity to go to New York when I finished shooting The Power of One. I could have gone to New York, but I chose to go back home and then come here just because, again, trying to help somebody out of pain. Yeah,
I tell you what, we're all the better for you coming here. We would not have this show without you.
No, it's been. I mean, with that all said, I'll say it's been a pleasure having you gentlemen, on this podcast, and I think it will be nice again to have these conversations, outside our regular. Our regular, kind of list of people we come to interview, because I think sometimes we we could easily just have people we bring in,
people often are. We were saying before. No disrespect to any of us of our age group. Yeah, and it's been really interesting talking to yourselves there, because you're both quite, you're young, you're still a student, you're a young person there, a young adult. There was a question which we always ask, which I because you and I have found a real kindred love of something, and I'll let Lungani ask that question and let you go with that.
We usually ask, like, what is your thing? What is that thing?
So, my passion that takes over all else is cricket. Cricket is always been my big thing. I remember it from being a little boy in the Caribbean, starting out with cricket. And then ever since then, that was it. I was obsessed with it. I was obsessed with the game. I was obsessed with the West Indian greats. They were always like my idols, my icons. The fact that they were more than just playing a sport. They were political giants as well. And I just thought they were absolutely incredible.
Who's your favourite?
Who's my favourite? So being 6'4", I was a quick bowler. So I modelled my game off of Curtly Ambrose. But he's my favourite bowler, but if I had to say my favourite player of all time, I'd say Vivian Richards.
I'm a Michael Holding.
You're a Michael Holding, okay.
Let me tell you, gentlemen, I have no clue when it comes to cricket.
Don't worry, it's you and me both.
Let me tell you, when I left school, they were just bringing in basketball, and they were bringing in cricket will come a few years later. But remember, for us in Zimbabwe, cricket was a white sport. It was mostly white schools that did sport. What about you, Tosin? What's your thing?
Oh, my thing is, it's more sort of like games and playing American football as well. It's those two things. So like playing video games and American football.
Because you're about 7 foot tall.
7 foot, just a little bit off that.
You can play for the French basketball team.
6'4".
6'4".
Oh, no, I'm 6'2".
Yeah, 6'2".
Yeah, they're giants, aren't they? These young people, we give them too much milk. We were deprived milk when we were growing up.
The first time I saw Tosin, I'm like, what's this giant? It's like the same. When I saw you, it's like I was reminded of Chooks. Because Chooks again is a giant. He just exudes that thing, like he just fills the space without trying. And then the voice just takes over. It's
the Nigerian genes, isn't it?
It's the Nigerian genes.
Yeah.
Thank you again, gentlemen. We will revisit these conversations. I think it will be, for us, this will be a good way of touching base and seeing what everything else is happening, and we'll make sure that like on the schedule we factor you in, because I think it's for me it's been a very refreshing take on what has been a difficult time for us here in the
Absolutely, it's been very difficult. Yeah,
and again, I'm always grateful for Donald.
Hey, I'm just grateful that you decided to opt for Britain, Sheffield rather than New York.
I could have been down and out in New York, bro.
Yes, you'd have been there in Central Park. Central Park or Graves Park? Come on.
Yeah. But thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and never miss an episode. Until next time, keep those conversations going and the clippers buzzing.